Hey, how is everybody doing? It's day 291, 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tom Nyback, and we are here talking about, Black history and issues and state of Black people, how Black people in America came to be in the position that they're in. It's the story would be very short if it was just being brought from Africa to work a little bit and then have been left alone. But we're talking about this um, issue. It's now 2020. We go back to like mid 1500s, where the ball starts rolling in slavery. Yet we're still messed up about it. I know white people, or some white people personally, who are messed up about it. Black people have an experience around it, and all these things. So what we're doing, we're untangling this this ball of twine, just little by little. We're just untangling it best we can. Even as we untangle it, if we're frustrated because it's been it's bound, it's part of the fabric of the land. So even after we do a little bit of work on it, it's still, but mostly if we leave it alone, it tends to drift back. You ever found a rounded piece of paper and you try to smooth it out, but it just rolls back up and you keep smoothing it. You have to actually put it, maybe in between some books for a time, and then it will get the idea. I'm a musician, and there's I think any musician will tell you this with uh, with crafted instruments. They take some getting used to. You take a brand new guitar right off the shelf. Well, it's going to be 5, 6 years before it starts to before the elements, the neck and the body behave like a guitar. Well, I got a good friend plays cello, right? Well, a good cello might be a couple 100 years old. Uh, I found, it's amazing. Wow, okay, but that would be considered, a good find there, because the instrument has resonances and feels and stuff like that. Think about your favorite hobby, you know, uh, when you get the elements new out of the box. Yeah, it works, it functions and stuff, but once you use it for a little while, and the feel of it in your hand and how you apply it, you know. Well, that's the institution of slavery, racism, the problem between the colors, skin colors in America. Even as weak an argument as it is, if you really dissected it, it has no merit. Um, it's like a dispensable condiment, but it's not the meat and potatoes of what defines life, right? But racism, discrimination, it makes no sense anyway. So, but it's even if in its nonsensical way as a phenomenon, it still holds extreme power. It's cost lives. It puts people at a disadvantage economically. I can't. I've hit on my own kind of glass ceiling. Women uh, encounter this and can speak on this very well. That their sex, um, you know, power isn't just white, but power is male. And so they have to navigate this male system, right? And they say they encounter ceilings, which I agree they do, right? My skin color creates a ceiling. My age had a ceiling, right? So all these things are creeping up in my life. I hope that I didn't indulge in my own discriminatory behavior, uh, that I'm not just reaping what I sow, in a sense. But America, this is very real in America. These tensions, whether they're derived, imaginary, pointless, um, lack merit, doesn't matter, because what we've had hundreds of years of an institution that exploited and took advantage of a group of people. We had about another 100 years of, like, even after these people were um, liberated, at least on paper, there was another about 100 years where their ability to participate and be competitive was severely restricted. You know, it wasn't until as recently as the 1960s, right, mid 50s, 60s, early 70s, that the disadvantaged group at least had a collective consensus to rail against this. They had enough, and some changes were made at that point. Uh, but they left what's called, when I was taking some business classes in the city, college here, 50s, 60s, 70s, for the black disadvantaged group. Well, they left what's called money on the table, right? They got a lot of lip service where they couldn't be overtly discriminated against. They couldn't be overtly marginalized, and whatnot. But it didn't matter, because these things kind of go on behind the scenes in secret. Nobody's, except a white supremacist or an extremist group, is out carrying banners and signs saying that there are uh, they are overtly oppressing us. You don't find that, but you find it um, looking for jobs, looking for health care. I'm a you may call a recovering addict. But whenever I reached out for help and had no money, the first place I was always sent was to the black neighborhood where they're selling the crack and stuff like that. But the initial offer of help was never out of that community. So through a lot of trial and error and failure, I did eventually learn how to uh, maintain some health and some clean time and sobriety in the very environment that would supply me with anything I needed, right? But it was because of my skin color, I got sent back down to the hood, so to speak, when my white counterparts, drug addicts, alcoholics, oh, they went to nice neighborhoods, quiet, no drug dealing, and stuff like that. But that's the racism that binds us, is still very much active and holding sway in America. I mean, mark my words. I don't. You're going to be hard pressed to convince me that race does not assert itself on some level on when we discourse either with one another, when we approach institutions, apply for jobs, healthcare, things like that. right? All this data they collect. And I got white friends who have problems with this too. Like, you want the data so you can determine. You're not getting so much a census anymore, but you're getting the data so you can determine where to place me, or what kind of initiatives are acceptable for me, right? But it's not like I check off black, you check off white, and we get the same um, approach to treatment, housing, and stuff like that. When I check off black, it means something financially. The expectation is almost lowered about where I want to go, where I want to end up, no matter what I believe, what kind of environment I believe would be nurturing for myself. And that's it, this go and it, I don't know about other countries, but I know America. This goes back to slavery, because initially the white European community abused, uh, manipulated, and put the black section of America, the community, under all kinds of restraints and manipulations. And here we are today. I'm hoping this work, this is my contribution. I'm inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson, and his successes brought me to this space. Hopefully, I'm bringing you to some further action. I'm not expecting a huge black revival in America from this work, but this is just one little piece of the grassroots of it. Education being, first one of the first pieces of the puzzle to bring about change for black folks. We're at day 291. I kind of had my little introduction there. I will make a plug for your financial literacy, whether you are doing well, whether you are means, or whether you are at the public library, sleeping in a shelter. I know because I've been there, and you got a full day to yourself. You haven't locked into your hustle yet and started uh, elevating yourself out of your situation, navigating a whole lot of issues. But good. Take some time, right? Part of your time, I want you to think about financial literacy. I want you to think about how you're going to be in a better place financially in the future than you are today. How to hold on to your dollars. How to, knowing how to generate the kind of resources you need to be self-sufficient, self-determining in America. It's a lot. It's a lot. And if you're starting like me in your 50s, there's a lot of conversations. I need a lot of support. I'm not asking for money here, but I'm asking you to be aware financially. Just start there. Be aware how you're spending your money, if you're holding on to it and such. All right, chapter 44. We're just meandering through Harriet Beecher Stowe's last chapter. Before we get there, we're going to do our little endorsements and advertisements. I'm inspired to do this work by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. I've read 3 of his works. He's got plenty of stuff, and he's here on YouTube as well. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and economic justice, and Dr. Anderson's national plan to empower Black America, Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com. Behind me, you'll see the hashtag #US2 symbol. You'll find Black women having their community, their voice, and support. Very important work there on Facebook, I think. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF. More social media, Black experience. If you got a business mind, check out Boyce Watkins at the Black Business School. Tell Tomlin's Nyback sent you. Also, if you can't find your voice or flavor here on the World Wide Web with millions of sites, do what I did. Start your own little grassroots thing. I got a handful of private email subscribers, and that's plenty for the way I'm wired anyway. Let's talk about murder and sex today in part 2. And I'm going to talk about, Tom's murder, Prue's murder. The Black people, we don't have it very well legally today. But just think, if you go back in time, Black people have less and less legal power. Everything that has to come through white bureaucracy. We got to wait for a white government to have amendments to let us vote, let us free, right? We are always being, we're rationed these favors from America's government, right? And just think, if you keep stepping back more so, when there was no Black representation at all, like there's a time where American government wouldn't even conceive of Black leadership in the halls of Congress somewhere. We just lost Elijah Cummings, right? A leader in the House and stuff. Impossible in 1792 America. They were in the back room deliberating about whether or not Black people were even full human beings. Legally, we're 3/5 of a human being, and stuff like that. I mentioned that, Tom's murder, Prue's murder, and stuff. Black people just did not, just mid-1800s, so it was 1850s. Black people did not have the kind of rights and advocacy. You go through the South, there were some placards up about punishment for murdering a slave, abusing a slave, and stuff like that. But on what rare occasion were those kind of laws enforced, right? Tom was murdered. No one's ever brought to justice. Prue was murdered. No one brought to justice. No big court case. Frederick Douglass tells his story, his eyewitness account of seeing one of his fellow slaves shot point blank in the face and murdered. That the slave overseer never got even a slap on the wrist, right? We fast forward to just a few years, after Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, you got the Dredd Scott decision, 1857, where, the slave went into a free state, came back, big argument, and said, well, I was in a free space, I should be free. And this went all the way to the Supreme Court. We've talked about this before. You can find it easily. Wikipedia, Google it, Dredd Scott decision. Dredd Scott wasn't his real name. But, the circumstances are almost minuscule compared to the Supreme Court decision that resulted from this argument that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and it was that the Supreme Court ruled that a white man has, or a black man has no rights that a white man will ever respect. You know, you just castrated all black people forever, for all time. And, they're saying that the courts are a partial jury and courts in favor of the will of white people. 1857 Dred Scott decision. Now and it's even exacerbated because I can't find anywhere where that's been addressed, overturned, or anything. We got a black man on the bench right now, Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas. I've not heard any feedback on this, and we say, well, maybe some people might laugh it off and be like, oh no, of course, if a black man goes to court nowadays, but precedence has, as far as the Supreme Court goes, law over the land, the United States of America. A black man has no rights that a white person needs to respect, and that is, and sure, we've got, uh, examples of both sides, but the point is, remember we talked at the beginning about the underpinnings, the foundation of the nation. This this attitude about murder, killing, and stuff. It's still woven into the fabric of America. Just 2019 had 2 incidents of black people being murdered in their homes by white police people. Right. So this is very real. I'm a advocate. Like, we've got to go piece by piece through Constitution, through past court decisions, and see what's obsolete. Either extract that language, or have language inserted to counteract what may be informing a kind of geist in the land. And this 1857 Dred Scott issue is still alive and kicking, still has influence because it's never been overturned. It's still there. That's the way my mind works. As far as when you look at a baseball game, and as it some of the rules about catching a fly ball, and when the runner is allowed to run and stuff, those rules are still in place, right? That's what makes the game. To strengthen or ease those rules, you've got to go into the books and rewrite that stuff. Same way here. This Dred Scott decision. It's never been overturned. I don't hear much about it. I was really exposed, educated about it when I got to Dr. Anderson's material. Very important. Harriet Stowe writes, this injustice, these murders, this is before the Dred Scott, but all that stuff is a precursor to the Supreme Court codifying its attitude towards black people in the land. She says this injustice is an inherent one in the slave system. It cannot exist without it. The slave system, cannot exist without it. And I'm of the mind that we're not that far from slavery. And we're not that far from slavery because black people and other groups are not self-determining their their way in the land and in the world. White folks are having businesses. You see um, uh, uh, this trend where fewer and fewer white people are getting the power and their industries, what they're creating and outsourcing and manipulating. I mean, you can do all your shopping from one store online now, and it's wresting power into fewer and fewer hands, and these hands hold sway over the course of the nation. It's having a snowball effect and gaining momentum. It's becoming harder to break the longer it continues. Uh, got some issues in America that we really need to work on. Sex, right? We got Eliza, Cassie, Emmeline, Miss Ditho, any other quadroon, octoroon, mulatto, female. These female, they are very beautiful. I'm talking, Beyonce type, Alicia Keys, Rihanna, right? Yeah, beautiful, right? Like, wow, stunning. And a lot of these women, well, back then, I won't say much now, I don't know, but back then, a lot of these very attractive women were created from unions between the slave master, black slave woman, and producing these beautiful kids that were still slaves, because you had to be pure white to be really free, you know, couldn't any kind of black. That's why the octa is eight, quads, quarter, right? That's how they, parse it out. Anyway, but these women were beautiful, and even white men were after them. They got high dollar value and things like that. Cassie's story about being passed from one white master to another, and this guy saying he wasn't loved and all that. Miss Defoe, towards the end of the book, she happened to fall in with a right white guy, but they had to go to France to get married. Couldn't marry. We'll talk. We've talked in the past. We'll talk again about some of the states with anti-marriage laws between black and white people, and all that, right? But you have this group, powerful white men exercising, sexual domination over um, their slaves. Right? Slavery wasn't just one group coercing and getting the labor from another group. It was mind, body, soul, sex, resources, families, right? Everything um, that, if it was a benefit to the system, to the slave system, it was forfeit. And so, Harriet Beecher Stowe, she puts this in her book. Now, she doesn't, because of she's kind of confined by time, so she can't speak explicitly about rape, underage rape, and things like that. But that's a lot of what went on there. Uh, but I think she's eloquent, and I think her readers, the audience, get the point about what she's trying to say. We'll give a shout out to the benevolent slave masters, uh, George Shelby, St. Clair before he was stabbed. Right? I mean, you've got, I don't know if it's 50-50, but you do have slave masters that don't want to hold on to these bodies all their lives. Some of the signers of the Declaration of Independence let their slaves go at their deaths, things like that. I'm going to wrap up here. Understand this work is important. What we're talking about, the subject is important because it's not going anywhere. The power group still is there. The disadvantaged group is still struggling and declining and suffering attrition. Matter of fact, other groups are gaining ground and surpassing black folks in the land. When I started reading Dr. Anderson's work, this is stuff he wrote 5-6 years ago, and he predicted almost the demise of black folks, and he was so right in what he was saying. So it still matters. You're not watching this by accident, no matter what side you're on. You're watching this for a reason. Maybe it'll move you to some action, at least a greater sense of sensitivity, I hope. But you're not here by accident. And what we're talking about here, this isn't just a historical exercise. We're talking about the phenomena that's happening in America today, right this minute. I'm Thomas Nyback. 365 days towards racial change, day 291 out of the way. You are a trooper. I got to say that. Thanks. Great seeing you again. We'll see you next time.